Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo. This week, much to my chagrin, we are already slipping behind schedule. There was a delay in receiving our bottom paint, so that kind of got us behind the 8-ball. So this week we finish up the bottom paint and I get 3 coats of paint on the boot stripe and I start to prepare the rub rail for paint. Hopefully early next week we can get all of the paint done and then we can get back in the water right away and start working on the engine and the water tanks, and then we'll be able to finally leave. Since we had already coated the damaged areas of the bottom paint, the first order of business of the week was to go ahead and get a fresh coat over the entire bottom. We are using Petit HRT Neptune. It is a water-based ablative anti-fouling paint. And as I was rolling on the bottom paint, I did find 2 more areas where the paint was loose. So I went ahead and cleaned those areas up. I put 1 coat on and then I came back throughout the week and put a couple of more coats on those areas. The boot stripe on a boat is the thin strip of paint right at the water line that separates the ablative bottom paint from the topside paint, or the gel coat in this case. To paint the boot stripe, I used Interlux Bright Side polyurethane paint, and I went with the color Fire Red. That was the same color that Frank had used previously, and it looked good, so I stuck with it. When I was doing the bottom paint and the boot stripe, I wasn't 100% sure which order to do it in. It would have been nice if I could do the boot top while I was waiting for the bottom paint, and I could kind of justify doing it both ways in my mind, so this is kind of a learning experience, an experiment to see if I did it the right way or the wrong way. My logic for this was I didn't want to put painter's tape over the freshly painted boot stripe for fear that it might have pulled up some of the paint, but then if it was pulling up the boot stripe, I probably didn't prep it correctly and it didn't adhere correctly, so it shouldn't have pulled off the paint from the boot stripe. So I probably could have done it in reverse order. I could have probably painted the boot stripe first and then the bottom, but just to be safe, I did the bottom first and then the boot stripe. And I did put 3 coats of paint on the boot stripe. It was wet sanded completely before the first coat, and then in between each coat of the boot stripe paint, I finally sanded it with 320 grit sandpaper, so it should have good adhesion through all 3 layers of the boot stripe. I did put 3 coats of paint on the boot top or the boot stripe, and it required 20 hours of dry time in between coats. So that gave me a little bit of extra time. And I could either work on the water tanks, or I decided let's take a look at the rub rails. And the rub rails run down the side of the boat and they kind of protect the boat in case you bang into a dock or something along that line. And it's a strip of wood, and I'm not exactly sure how Frank bent that strip of wood into the position it's in. It's very impressive. I don't know if he set up a steam box and just mapped it out 3-dimensionally and bent the wood into that shape. Or I can't imagine it was a big block of wood and he carved it out of that. I can't get there. So it had to be bent somehow, but this is impressive. It runs probably 28 feet along the side of the boat in a 3-dimensional curve through X, Y, and Z axis. I don't know how he did it. I have maybe some idea, but nonetheless, it's pretty darn impressive. And I decided to go ahead and take a look at that. So I knew there was some damage there. I went ahead and got out the orbital sander and I spent a couple of hours sanding down both sides on the rub rail, and the damage was way more extensive than what I had realized. There was some rotted wood in there, and unfortunately I just don't have the time right now to fix it properly. And as I recorded a little clip that'll show more about it, and Frank kind of walked me through some things, he kind of smacked me and said, don't do stuff half-assed like you're planning on doing. So I always thank him for that when he does that, because he's right. Fix it right the first time. So, yeah. So I'm going to do what I can, and it'll be protected better than what it would have been if I had left it. But it's a project I'm just going to have to work on down the line. The ablative bottom paint is so good at its job that it's actually really hard to get anything to stick to it, even painter's tape or any tape for that matter. It just falls right off, which is, you know, what it's designed to do, so that's great. But that left one edge that I had to try to maintain with a brush, which was a little bit difficult, but I did get down onto the bottom paint a few times, so hopefully that doesn't create a spot where it'll move up into the boot top and remove that paint because there's a void there. I'm hoping that. And I don't know if you can hear Linus whining, but sorry about that. So I did have to maintain one edge, and for the second and third coats, for the first coat I had a square. Linus, buddy, do you want to talk to the people? So for the first coat, I had just a squared off brush, which was a little frustrating because it would splay out. I'm a bit of a Luddite, and yeah, it just got away from me a few times. So I got some of the boot top paint down onto the bottom paint. But for the second and third coat, I got an angled brush, and it held its shape a lot better, even with my ham fists, and it went a lot better. So I think it looks okay. It's not perfect, but nothing I do is perfect, so yeah.
Hey y'all, so this here that runs along the side of the boat is called a rub rail, and that is just protection in case we bang into something. And you can see here it's just a strip of wood, thick wood, that was shaped. I can't imagine how Frank did this. This must have been a major pain in the ass to do. But I did sand this down a few days ago, and because I wanted to get it repainted, and I knew there were some spots in the wood that were bad, and here you can see is probably the worst spot of all, and this is pretty much rotten through here, all the way from the top down to the bottom. So originally I had a harebrained idea to try and use some, they actually make wood bondo, and I was going to try and use some wood bondo to rebuild this area, but I talked to Frank, and he talked me out of my harebrained idea, which is a good thing. And you know, I guess it pays just to do it right, and he's 100% right, and that's to cut out all of the bad stuff and replace it. And I will eventually do that. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time before leaving. It's getting too darn late in the year. It's already starting to get cold in the morning here in Delaware, so I really just kind of have to get this boat back in the water and get going. So I do have, this is Rotten Wood Restorer, and it's it just basically hardens up soft wood like these areas. And at this point I'm just going to paint this to give it some protection, but it is pretty spongy right now, so I'm going to use some of this Rotten Wood Restorer and paint these bad areas, or just apply it so I can get some paint on there so there is some protection before leaving. And then when I get to Florida or down south somewhere, when I've got a little more time, I can fix this properly, because I'm gonna have to take this entire strip off here. Looks like it goes halfway back, so this is gonna be quite a project that I just don't have the time to get into now. It's more important that I get the water tanks done and the engine fixed and get the heck out of here. So, all right, so I'm just gonna coat this these bad areas with that wood restorer just to harden it up so it doesn't deteriorate any further. I'm going to get some paint on there, and then we're going to get back in the water so we can finish up our last two things and poke on down the road. All right, I hope you guys are well, and I'm going to get to work on this.
I would love to give a massive shout out to our Patreon crew: Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Joan and Jim Linbo, Sherry Erickson, Genesis Ava Linbo, and Deb Shaw. Y'all's support means the world to me. I really appreciate it. Without your guys' support, I probably wouldn't make these videos. If you are interested in becoming a member of our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that'll give you access to our Patreon page where there are tons of bonus content, videos, photos, that kind of stuff. And if you do enjoy our videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. That really helps us out. And if you really like them, leave a comment. That helps us out even more. All right, I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week.